John Bennett wasn't just a successful businessman. He was a visionary. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood, he'd worked his way up, building a luxury retail empire known for exclusive, high-end fashion. But for John, his brand wasn't just about luxury. It was about creating a place where everyone felt valued, where elegance met genuine human connection. His stores were meant to be welcoming, no matter who walked in the door. On a crisp autumn morning, John decided to make a discreet visit to one of his flagship stores. This was a tradition of his, to go incognito and observe how customers were treated. Dressed simply in dark jeans, a plain jacket, and a worn baseball cap, he didn't look anything like the typical high-spending clientele his store usually attracted. But today, he wanted to blend in. He was curious to see how his vision for the brand was being upheld, and whether customers received the respect he intended regardless of their appearance. As he stepped inside, the familiar sound of the door chime greeted him. The store was a masterpiece of elegance. Marble floors gleamed under soft lighting, while racks of carefully selected designer clothing were set perfectly in place. Soft jazz played in the background, filling the air along with the subtle hint of high-end cologne. However, John noticed something immediately. No one greeted him. He took a moment to look around, observing the store's employees. Most of them seemed to be busy assisting other customers, all of whom were dressed in visibly expensive attire. They were given warm smiles, attentive service, and courteous gestures. In contrast, John, who was dressed far more casually, was overlooked entirely. Determined to get a genuine sense of how the staff treated customers without special recognition, John walked up to a glass display case that showcased a selection of watches. Each watch was an intricate work of art, some costing well into six figures. He reached for a sleek silver piece with a leather strap, admiring its design. "Excuse me," he said in a polite tone, hoping to catch the attention of one of the staff members. That was when Richard Coleman, the store's franchise manager, appeared. In his mid-50s, Richard had an air of confidence and authority, dressed sharply in a tailored suit. He glanced at John, but rather than the polite smile he reserved for other customers, Richard's expression shifted into something less welcoming, an appraising look tinged with suspicion. "Yes, can I help you?" Richard's voice was cool, lacking the warmth he'd just offered another customer moments before. John, maintaining his polite demeanor, nodded toward the watch. "This is a beautiful piece. Could you tell me more about it?" Richard's eyes narrowed slightly as he took in John's casual attire. There was a brief silence before he responded, his tone curt and dismissive. "That's one of our limited edition models. Quite exclusive, actually. It may not be what you're looking for." The comment didn't escape John, and he felt a flicker of irritation. Nevertheless, he kept his tone light. "Why not?" he asked. "I'm interested in high-end pieces." Richard sighed, as though the interaction were a waste of his time. "It's priced at $122,000, he replied pointedly, watching John closely to gauge his reaction. John nodded thoughtfully, still holding the watch, appreciating its weight. "That's quite impressive," he said, smiling. "If I wanted to buy it, would there be any other steps?" A faint sneer crossed Richard's face as he replied, "We'd need proof of payment, of course. We don't just let anyone handle our best merchandise." A sense of disbelief settled over John. He knew he didn't fit the stereotype of a typical customer in Richard's eyes, but he hadn't expected this level of condescension. "So," John continued, trying to mask his irritation, "it's store policy to assess a customer's financial status before making a sale?" Richard stiffened, his polite facade slipping slightly. "It's about maintaining our brand's integrity and image," he replied. "We can't have just anyone coming in and expecting access to our most exclusive items." Taking a deep breath to steady himself, John forced a calm smile. "I understand," he said, gently placing the watch back in the case. His voice softened as he looked Richard in the eyes. "Thank you for your time." As he turned to leave, John could feel Richard's gaze following him, filled with an air of silent judgment. The interaction had left him disheartened. He had come hoping to see his brand embody the values he held dear, only to find that his own employees had failed to uphold them. Stepping outside, John took in the cool autumn air, his mind racing. He had given Richard the benefit of the doubt, but the experience had been an eye-opener. Behind the polished marble floors and gold-lettered signs, there was a troubling reality, one where respect was conditional, granted only to those who looked the part. The frustration simmered within him as he began walking down the crowded street. He had witnessed enough. This wasn't just a one-time lapse in judgment, but a blatant disregard for the values he had spent years instilling in his company. For John, this went beyond just protecting his brand. It was about treating every customer with dignity, something he had once vowed to do from his very first store opening. Tonight, he would make a decision. Tomorrow, he would not return as John Bennett, the unknown customer. He would come back as John Bennett, the owner and leader. And there would be no disguises, no baseball cap to obscure his face. It was time to confront the prejudice hiding within the walls of his own business. That evening, John lay awake, replaying the day's events in his mind. The look on Richard's face, the sneer in his voice, and the quick, dismissive glances from the other staff members were etched into his thoughts. It wasn't just that Richard had judged him based on his clothes. He had reduced him to someone unworthy of respect. It was everything John stood against. By morning, John's disappointment had shifted into determination. He resolved to revisit the store, this time to see if Richard's attitude was a pattern or a single misstep. When he arrived, dressed in the same casual clothes, the store was quieter than the previous day. As John walked in, he headed straight for the jewelry section. His gaze landed on an elegant diamond necklace resting beneath the soft lights, the stones glittering with a quiet sophistication. Just as he reached to take a closer look, he saw Richard out of the corner of his eye, watching him with the same disdain as before. Within moments, Richard made his way over, his demeanor unchanged. "Is there something I can help you with?" he asked, his voice clipped. "Yes," John replied, offering a polite smile. "Could you tell me about this necklace?" Richard sighed, barely masking his irritation. He paused as though weighing his words before replying. "This necklace is one of our premier items, crafted with the highest quality diamonds and set in platinum. It's not exactly affordable." John kept his tone steady, though he felt his patience wearing thin. "It's beautiful. How much is it?" "It's $15,000, Richard replied, enunciating each word slowly, as if explaining to a child. "And we reserve pieces like this for our more serious clients." John met his gaze, struggling to maintain his composure. "And what exactly makes a customer serious in your eyes?" Richard's expression grew even colder. "Experience," he replied shortly. "I've been in this business long enough to know who can afford what. I don't mean any offense," he added, though his tone betrayed the opposite. "But perhaps you'd be more comfortable with something more affordable." John took a slow breath, steadying himself. He decided to push a little further. "I appreciate quality," he said calmly. "In fact, I'm very interested in this necklace and would like to see how it looks." Richard crossed his arms, the sneer returning to his face. "Our policy is to reserve these items for clients who are both qualified and committed to making a purchase. It's about maintaining the brand's exclusivity." A flicker of frustration crossed John's face as he held Richard's gaze. "And do you uphold that exclusivity by judging people based on how they look?" Richard shrugged. "It's not personal," he replied dismissively. "Our customers expect a certain atmosphere, and we don't want to waste time on those who aren't serious buyers." John felt the simmering frustration within him rise to a boil. He took a step back, looking around the store, observing the polished displays, the shimmering jewelry, the high-end clothing. Everything looked perfect on the surface, yet beneath the gleaming marble floors and chic decor was an underlying attitude of exclusion, one he had witnessed firsthand. This was about more than just his experience with Richard. It was about protecting the principles that had guided him from the very start. Turning back to Richard, John's voice took on a new, steely edge. "Thank you for your time," he said quietly, but the weight of his disappointment was evident in his tone. Without another word, John walked toward the door, his mind racing. He had hoped to observe a store that treated every visitor with respect, but instead, he had encountered a hierarchy of courtesy based on appearances. John was no stranger to discrimination. Growing up, he'd faced it in countless forms, but he had worked hard to build a business where people could feel welcome, regardless of their background. Yet here he was, standing in his own store, facing the same judgment he had once vowed to eradicate. As the door closed behind him, John knew his role in this story was far from over. He would be returning, but this time, he would come not as an anonymous customer, but as the owner himself. And he would ensure that Richard and his staff understood the values that had built this brand. The experience had cemented John's resolve. Tomorrow, he would reveal his true identity, and things were about to change. The next day, John arrived at his company's headquarters, his mind already focused on what lay ahead. He was dressed sharply in a tailored suit, a look far from the casual attire he'd worn on his store visits. Today, he would make his presence known, and there would be no misunderstandings about his position. John's assistant, Lisa, had arranged a meeting with Richard Coleman under the guise of discussing future goals and store performance. The cover ensured that Richard would arrive without any suspicion. John wanted to confront him directly, but he knew that patience and professionalism would be essential. When Richard entered the sleek, glass-walled conference room, he wore an air of confidence, fully expecting another routine business review. But the moment his eyes landed on John, his expression shifted, flickering with confusion. He glanced at Lisa, then back at John, struggling to place him. He looked like the man he'd dismissed in the store. Yet now he was in charge. John allowed the silence to stretch for a moment, watching as realization dawned on Richard's face. Finally, he gestured for Richard to take a seat, his voice calm but firm. "Please, have a seat, Richard." "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," Richard said, his tone cautious as he took the seat across from John. "I wasn't expecting to see you here. Is everything all right?" John leaned forward, fixing Richard with a steady gaze. "No, Richard," he said slowly. "Everything is not all right." There was a pause as John watched Richard's composure begin to crack. "I've come to discuss some serious concerns about the way you operate my store." Richard's eyes widened, and he opened his mouth to respond, but John didn't give him a chance. "I visited the store yesterday," John continued, his voice unwavering. "You didn't recognize me because I came as a regular customer, dressed casually." He took a brief pause, letting his words sink in. "And I saw how you treated me, and likely how you treat other customers as well." Realization washed over Richard's face, followed closely by panic. "Mr. Bennett, I didn't know it was you," he stammered, attempting to regain his footing. "If I had known," John held up a hand, silencing him. "That's exactly the problem, Richard," he replied, his tone calm but laced with disappointment, searching for words. "I was just trying to maintain the brand's image, Mr. Bennett," he explained, his voice edged with defensiveness. "Our customers expect a certain atmosphere, exclusivity. We want the right clientele." John's gaze sharpened. "And do you decide who's the right clientele based on appearances alone?" he asked, his voice now laced with quiet anger. "Because from what I saw, you dismissed me based solely on how I looked. That attitude doesn't just go against my values. It damages everything I've built." Richard sat rigidly, his face reddening as he tried to respond. "With all due respect, Mr. Bennett, we have a certain standard to uphold. It's about protecting the brand's integrity." "Integrity?" John's voice was measured but tinged with frustration. "Integrity isn't about excluding people who don't look a certain way. Integrity is treating every person who walks through our doors with respect." John's words hit hard, and Richard's confidence wavered. "Look, I've been with the company for years, Mr. Bennett," Richard said, his tone desperate. "Our sales are strong, and I've kept the brand's reputation intact. If there was a misunderstanding, I'm more than willing to address it." "This isn't about a misunderstanding," John replied, firmly. "This is about how you fundamentally view people and the experience you're giving my customers. I created this brand to be inclusive, a place where anyone, no matter who they are, feels valued." A heavy silence filled the room as Richard struggled to find the right words. "Mr. Bennett, please," he said quietly, his voice laced with desperation. "I can change. I can implement training, whatever it takes." John shook his head slowly, his expression resolute. "It's too late, Richard. Your attitude isn't something that can be fixed with training. It's ingrained in the way you see people, and it goes against everything I stand for." The weight of John's words hung in the air, the finality unmistakable. Effective immediately, John said, his voice calm but unyielding. I'm terminating your franchise agreement. You're no longer responsible for that store. Richard's face paled, shock and disbelief etched into his features. You can't be serious, he stammered. I've been loyal to this company. I've built that store's reputation. You can't just cut me off like this. But John's expression didn't waver. Yes, I can. And I will, he replied steadily. The reputation you've built is not the one I envisioned. Security. We'll escort you out, and you'll receive instructions regarding the termination process. Richard's face twisted with anger and desperation. You're making a mistake, Mr. Bennett, he said, his voice trembling. I'm the best manager this company has. You'll regret this. John remained calm, his voice unshakable. No, Richard, he replied, his tone resolute. The mistake was allowing someone in a position of power who could harm the values we stand for. I won't regret ensuring my stores are run by people who truly understand the heart of this brand. For a moment, Richard simply stared at John, a mixture of disbelief and bitterness in his eyes. Then, without another word, he rose from his seat, his footsteps echoing in the hallway as he left the room. As the door closed, John felt a sense of resolve settle over him. He hadn't just fired Richard. He'd taken a stand for everything he believed in. It wasn't enough to sell luxury products if the brand lost its soul in the process. The company needed leaders who saw the value in every customer, leaders who understood that respect wasn't reserved for a select few. Turning to Lisa, who had been standing by the door, he nodded. Make sure Richard is escorted out and that the transition process begins immediately, he instructed. Yes, Mr. Bennett, Lisa replied, her expression firm. With that, John walked over to the window, looking out over the city below. He'd taken a necessary step, and though there would be challenges, he felt a quiet sense of pride in his decision. Tomorrow, he would visit the store once more, but with new leadership, a leadership that would reflect his values and make his vision a reality. The following day, John walked into the store once more. This time, the air felt different. Richard's departure had sent ripples through the staff, stirring a mix of relief, worry, and hope. John was determined to address these concerns openly and set a clear direction. Sarah Moore, the assistant manager who would be stepping into Richard's role, was waiting for him near the entrance. Sarah greeted him with a warm, slightly nervous smile. Her posture was confident, but John could see that she carried the weight of the transition. She had witnessed Richard's behavior firsthand and had often felt helpless to change it. Now, with John's support, she had a chance to reshape the store's culture into one of respect and inclusion. Good morning, Mr. Bennett, she said, extending a hand. Thank you for trusting me with this role. I won't let you down. John smiled and shook her hand. I know you won't, Sarah. I'm confident you'll bring the changes this store needs to reflect our values. Let's meet with the team and make sure everyone understands the new direction. They moved to the store's back office, where the staff had gathered, their expressions a mix of apprehension and curiosity. John began the meeting with a calm but firm tone. Thank you all for being here today, he said, making eye contact with each team member. As some of you may know, Richard Coleman is no longer with us. His departure is a necessary step toward realigning this store's operations with the values we stand for as a brand. A few employees exchanged glances, and John could sense their uncertainty. He continued, maintaining a reassuring tone. I want each of you to know that your jobs are secure. We value your dedication and hard work. But moving forward, we'll be making some changes to ensure that every person who walks through those doors feels respected and welcome. This isn't just about sales. It's about building relationships and treating everyone who enters with dignity. John then introduced Sarah as the interim manager. Sarah will be leading these efforts, and I have complete confidence in her ability to guide us. Our focus now is on ensuring that every customer feels valued, whether they're buying our most expensive item or just browsing. As Sarah stepped forward to address the team, she radiated a newfound confidence. I know some of you might be worried about what these changes mean, she began. But please understand, this is an opportunity for growth, for us to improve how we interact with every single customer. One of the sales associates, James, raised his hand. "What exactly will this training involve?" he asked. "And how long will it last?" Sarah nodded, appreciating his question. "The training will cover everything from how we greet customers to handling difficult situations with tact and professionalism," she replied. "We'll also include workshops on cultural awareness and inclusivity to make sure we all feel empowered to provide the best service possible. We'll start with a series of short sessions over the next few weeks and continue to build on this throughout the year." A murmur of understanding passed through the room, and John could see some of the tension ease in their faces. Another employee, an older woman named Lisa, spoke up. "And if we see behavior that doesn't align with these values, should we report it directly to you, Sarah?" John stepped in to address the question. "Yes, you can report any concerns to Sarah. And you can also come directly to me," he said firmly. "My door is always open. We take these issues seriously, and I want everyone here to feel safe and supported in speaking up." There was a visible shift in the room as the staff absorbed the clarity of John's commitment. They weren't just hearing about change, they were being involved in it. John knew that building trust would be key to creating an environment where every employee felt responsible for upholding the brand's values. A young woman named Claire, who worked as a cashier, raised her hand hesitantly. "What if we have a situation where a customer acts the way Richard did?" she asked. "How do we handle difficult situations, especially if they're being rude or discriminatory?" "That's a great question, Claire," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "Part of our training will cover conflict resolution and de-escalation techniques. If you ever feel uncomfortable or if a customer is behaving inappropriately, please don't hesitate to call on a manager. We want you to feel empowered to handle these situations professionally, but we're here to support you as well." John nodded in agreement. "Remember, you're not alone in this. We're a team, and together we'll work to create an environment where everyone feels respected, both staff and customers alike." As he looked around the room, John saw a cautious optimism emerge among the staff. They had questions, yes, but they were reassured by the clear vision and support he and Sarah were offering. John felt a sense of relief as well. These changes wouldn't solve every issue overnight, but they were a start. And the store needed to be a place where everyone felt welcome, valued, and seen. "Thank you all for your time," John said, wrapping up the meeting. "I believe in each of you, and I trust that we can work together to make this store a model of what our brand stands for." The staff slowly dispersed, some stopping to ask Sarah quick questions, others heading back to their duties with a renewed sense of purpose. John watched them go, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He had made the right choice in promoting Sarah. She was already showing the qualities of a true leader, and her connection with the staff was evident. As the room emptied, John turned to Sarah, who was beaming with a sense of accomplishment and resolve. "You did well today," he said with a smile. "The staff respects you, and they're looking to you for guidance. Keep that momentum going." "Thank you, Mr. Bennett," Sarah replied, her face glowing with gratitude. "I won't let you down. I believe we can make a real difference here." John nodded, reassured. "I know you will," he said warmly. "I'll be checking in regularly, but I trust you to handle things on the ground. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." As Sarah left the conference room, John felt a renewed sense of optimism. The events of the past days had been challenging, but they had also sparked a necessary shift. He knew there was more work ahead, but today was a step in the right direction. Watching the staff interact with customers that afternoon, John felt something new in the air. The store was already beginning to reflect the spirit he had envisioned, with employees greeting customers warmly and assisting without hesitation. It was a stark contrast to the cold, selective atmosphere he had encountered during his first visit. For the first time in days, John felt truly proud, confident that he was steering his brand toward a brighter future, one where respect and inclusivity would be the cornerstones of his success. Several weeks after Richard's termination, the transformation of the store was well underway. The training sessions led by Sarah had taken root, and staff morale was high. John frequently dropped by unannounced to observe the new energy in the store and saw positive changes with each visit. Customers now received a warm greeting and genuine assistance, and the team was clearly thriving under Sarah's leadership. One morning, as John arrived for one of these visits, he was met with a surprise he hadn't anticipated. Standing at the store's entrance, looking far less put together than usual, was Richard Coleman. His face bore lines of worry, and his usually pristine suit was slightly rumpled. When he saw John approaching, he straightened up, his eyes filled with a desperation that was new. "Mr. Bennett," Richard called, his voice edged with a pleading tone. "Could I please have a moment of your time?" John stopped, weighing his response. He had long since closed the door on Richard's role in the company, but he sensed there was something unresolved. After a brief pause, he nodded. "All right, Richard. You have a moment. What would you like to say?" Richard took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to speak. "Mr. Bennett, I wanted to apologize," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I acted terribly that day. I've had a lot of time to think, and I realize how wrong I was. I judged people unfairly, and I let my own prejudices get in the way of doing my job." John listened, his expression calm but unreadable. Richard seemed genuine, but he knew that desperation could often be mistaken for remorse. Richard continued, his gaze fixed on the ground. "I was with this company for years, Mr. Bennett. I care about the brand. Please, give me another chance. Let me prove that I can change." John's eyes softened, but he kept his tone firm. "Richard, I appreciate your apology, but this isn't just about one mistake. It's about a pattern, a way of thinking that goes against everything I built this company to represent." Richard's face fell, and he looked away, his voice now almost a whisper. "I understand. I know I failed. I was blind to the harm I was causing, and I'm sorry. I just wanted to give this one last try." John took a deep breath, his voice softening. "Richard, this is bigger than any single apology. I need people who fundamentally believe in treating everyone with dignity, not just the right kind of customers. It's a value that can't be taught through training. It has to come from within." Richard's shoulders sagged as the weight of John's words settled in. He looked up, his expression one of sadness mixed with understanding. "I thought about that too," he said quietly. "I just thought maybe I could make things right if I tried harder." John gave him a steady look. "Richard, I hope you take this as an opportunity to reflect and grow. This isn't about punishment. It's about ensuring that our customers and our employees are treated with respect and fairness. That's the kind of leadership I need in my stores." Richard swallowed hard, his face filled with resignation. "Thank you for hearing me out, Mr. Bennett," he said softly. "I'll respect your decision." With a nod, Richard turned and walked away, his footsteps slow and heavy. John watched him go, feeling a twinge of sympathy but knowing he had made the right choice. In his heart, he wished Richard well, hoping that he would learn from the experience. But he couldn't allow the company's integrity to be compromised, not for any individual, no matter their history. As he turned back to the store, John felt a sense of peace. It was never easy to turn someone away, especially someone who had been with the company for years. But he knew that Richard's presence would only hinder the store's progress and that this was the right path to protect what he had worked so hard to build. Inside, the store was bustling, customers greeted warmly by the staff. He watched Sarah, now confident in her role, interact with employees and clients alike, her leadership style rooted in empathy and genuine care. Her positive influence was clear in the way the team operated, a stark contrast to the dismissive, selective environment Richard had fostered. Reflecting on his decision, John felt reassured. He had chosen values over profit, integrity over complacency, and his brand was stronger for it. There were more challenges ahead, he knew, but with Sarah and his team by his side, John felt ready to face them. With Richard's departure behind them, the store flourished under Sarah's leadership. The transformation was unmistakable, both in atmosphere and approach. Customers from all walks of life were greeted with the same warmth and professionalism, each interaction underscored by respect and genuine interest. The changes resonated not only with the customers but with the employees, who now felt a renewed sense of purpose and pride in their work. 1 month after the new training initiatives had begun, John decided to pay an unannounced visit to the store to see the progress firsthand. The familiar chime greeted him as he walked through the doors, but the feeling inside was worlds apart from his previous visits. As he looked around, He saw staff members engaged in lively yet professional conversations with customers. Associates moved confidently around the store, assisting clients without hesitation or prejudice. John was welcomed with a warm smile by James, one of the younger sales associates who had openly asked questions during the training meetings. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," James said, his voice carrying a note of enthusiasm. "It's great to see you again. How can we help you today?" John returned the greeting, shaking James's hand. "Good morning, James. I just wanted to see how everyone was settling in with the new changes." James's face lit up. "Honestly, things have never been better. The training sessions were eye-opening, and Sarah has been an amazing leader. The team feels more connected, and we're all on the same page about treating every customer with respect." John felt a deep sense of satisfaction hearing this, knowing that his vision for the brand was being realized. "I'm glad to hear that, James. Keep up the excellent work," he replied, patting him on the shoulder. As John moved further into the store, he saw Sarah chatting with a customer near a display of handbags. She was attentive and engaging, her face reflecting genuine interest as the customer described her needs. When Sarah noticed John, she excused herself with a smile and approached him. "Mr. Bennett, it's so good to see you," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "How's everything on your end?" John smiled. "I was just here to see how things were going, and from what I can see, I couldn't be more pleased with the progress. You've done a fantastic job, Sarah. The store feels completely transformed." Sarah beamed, her pride evident. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. The team has truly embraced the changes, and we're already seeing positive feedback from customers. It feels like we're finally creating the atmosphere you envisioned." John nodded. "You're absolutely right, and I couldn't have done it without you. You've brought a new level of empathy and professionalism to the team, and it shows in every corner of this store." Their conversation was briefly interrupted by the sound of the door chime. John turned to see a customer enter, a young woman with a hesitant look, her attire modest compared to some of the other shoppers. She lingered by the entrance, as if unsure whether she belonged in such a high-end store. Before John could say anything, he watched as one of the associates, Claire, approached the woman with a friendly smile. "Good morning. Is there anything I can help you find today?" Claire's tone was warm, and she made the woman feel immediately at ease. John felt a swell of pride as he observed the interaction. Claire's demeanor was genuine, and there was no trace of the condescension or judgment that had once been commonplace under Richard's management. The young woman relaxed, visibly reassured, and began asking questions about a handbag displayed nearby. As John and Sarah observed, Sarah spoke softly. "This is exactly the kind of environment we wanted to create. A place where people feel welcome, no matter who they are or what they look like." John nodded, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. "And you've made it possible, Sarah. You're not just a manager, you're a leader, and that's what this store needed." Sarah looked down, a bit embarrassed but clearly touched. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. That means a lot. I always believed that luxury and inclusivity could coexist, but I wasn't sure it would be possible until you gave me this opportunity." John smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Believe me, Sarah, you've exceeded every expectation. Your leadership has made this store a place where respect and dignity come first, and I'm incredibly grateful for that." As they stood together, watching the associates interact with customers and witnessing the welcoming energy that filled the store, John knew he had made the right choice. This transformation wasn't just a momentary improvement. It was a shift in culture, one that would influence every corner of his business. With a sense of pride and purpose, John realized that his brand was now more than just a luxury chain. It was a beacon of integrity, a place where every customer could walk through the doors and feel valued. He felt an immense responsibility to uphold these values, not just here, but in every one of his stores. After saying his goodbyes, John left the store, his heart light and his mind focused on the future. As he walked down the bustling city street, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. The challenges with Richard, the tough decisions, the difficult conversations, all of it had been necessary to build a brand that truly stood for something meaningful. The success of the store was no longer defined by profits alone. It was about building a community, a place where people from all walks of life could experience luxury with respect and dignity. And as John walked away, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that he had not just upheld his values, but had strengthened them. With leaders like Sarah by his side, he knew his brand would continue to thrive, not just as a symbol of opulence, but as a place that valued the humanity in everyone it served.